This is MOJO News with Chester Nahn.
More than 100,000 people shut down the city on Friday in a global movement to save the planet. Tens of thousands of Victorian school students walked out of the classroom and onto the streets, demanding government action on climate change.
Walking out of class to give the government a lesson on climate change.
I feel like there's no point in going to school if we're not going to have a future.
Tens of thousands of students packed Treasury Gardens and spilled onto nearby roads before marching through the city streets, shutting down the CBD and causing traffic gridlock.
Almost half our year level in year 9 is coming.
If one person doesn't go, then everyone won't go. So everyone's here. I think it's a good turnout, but it's not good enough because my dad didn't come.
With their banners held high and megaphones at the ready, students delivered a lecture to the government.
If you know that kids are having to become adults because adults are acting like kids, you know there's something wrong, and this is a real crisis, so we need your help.
Skipping school on the last day of term, these students joined hundreds of thousands of people across the country. Rallying to put climate change at the top of the agenda.
Particularly Australia and also the US aren't being open-minded enough to actually transition to renewables.
Is school more important than our future that we are fighting for?
Joining them on their climate campaign, thousands of workers and even the elderly.
And I am just emboldened by seeing all these young people here with all their energy and their passion and thinking, thank God they're out. They realise the danger, they're standing up, and beware politicians because they're coming and you won't last.
Uni students also pitched in.
We are a huge exporter of coal, a fairly large exporter of gas, and per capita we have one of the highest emissions in the world. So I don't think we're doing our part at all.
The fight continues for these students, hoping that some sort of action will be taken in the fight for climate change.
Nick Zachariah, MOJO News.
It wasn't just school students who took a day off, university students did too. Monash University supported their students walking out, while one RMIT lecturer offered full marks to those who joined the march.
They swapped their lecture theatres for the State Library. Their message was hard to miss.
We want climate action! And we want it now!
Fired up over climate change, university students congregated in the city, demanding Australia's leaders to start listening.
You know, years and years of asking nicely have yielded almost nothing because I think power seeds nothing without a demand, and I think it's important for us to actually get out on the streets and demand change.
Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack labelled the protest as a disruption and said it should be held on a weekend. But for these students, nothing could stop them from fighting for their future. Not even assignments.
I have 3 assessments due on Saturday, which I definitely should be working on, but I found this to be really important, but I did get an extension on one of those. So.
At RMIT University, a lecturer offered his students full marks if they skipped his class and attended the strike as part of an environmental design project. According to the RMIT lecturer, all they needed to do was to email him a group selfie while in the crowd for the strike. Other lectures were simply cancelled.
Did you skip any classes to come to the strike today?
Well, I was going to, but our class was conveniently cancelled, so that left some space.
After the gathering at the State Library, university students then joined their school-age counterparts in a spectacular show of people power. Elinor Freestrom, MOJO News.
Now, the idea of students walking out of school for climate action was inspired by environmental activist Greta Thunberg, who skipped school every week and stood outside the Swedish Parliament to voice her concerns. And last Friday, millions of students from more than 100 countries followed in her footsteps.
The Melbourne School Strike for Climate was organised by a group of high school students, including Ella Simons, who I spoke to after the protest.
I wish I didn't have to strike from school. It shouldn't be me solving this problem, but you're not doing anything about it, so I do have to do something about it. And we will fight until we have justice. They will see the numbers, and there's this thing, if you get more than 3.5%, it means that, like, our country, it means so much that they need to do something about it, and it's worth doing it. And we need to get across to our politicians that we have the solutions. We don't need to come up with anything new. We have a budget that can do this. I think we had an insane turnout. It was incredible how many people came and showed that they really care. And I hope that our government sees this and that they will take action, and that this is not the end and we will continue fighting. Our ecosystem is falling apart. We have mass extinctions of all different things destroyed currently, and it's all happening, and people aren't doing anything about it. Our people in power aren't taking action, and we need them to put this as their #1 issue and take action on it. Greta is so inspirational, and I agree with her. When people say you shouldn't be striking, I agree with them. I don't think I need to miss out on school. I want an education, and it's not my problem that our world is falling apart, but it has come to me to solve this and to be part of the solution.
The fight is not over yet, as students have already started planning for more strikes. Sheetal Singh, MOJO News.
The Richmond Tigers will battle Greater Western Sydney in Saturday's AFL Grand Final after Geelong and Collingwood were defeated in the prelims. Let's go to Nick Zachariah for more on this. Nick, it's the GWS Giants' first Grand Final.
That's right, Chester. When GWS set foot on the G this Saturday, it will be the first time in the club's history that they have reached an AFL Grand Final. The Giants defied all odds to reach the big dance, and the Grand Final newcomers will have to give it their all against the Tigers, especially with a hefty chunk of their best 22 being sidelined with injuries. With close to 100,000 supporters expected to show up to Australia's biggest day in sport, the excitement is at an all-time high. Richmond's yellow and black army is set to roar the house down as they look to taste Premiership glory once more. The Tigers have won their past 11 games thanks to some excellent play by Dustin Martin. Goal machine Tom Lynch is also set to make an impact with the recruit entering a grand final in his first season at Richmond. Melbourne will host the grand final parade on Friday ahead of the match's first bounce on Saturday at 2 p.m. The MCG will be ramping up its security for the grand final both in and out of the ground. Police have warned they'll be out in force targeting drunkenness and antisocial behaviour. We're in for a blockbuster weekend of footy. I'm tipping the Tigers by 2 goals. Back to you, Chester.
All right, Nick, we look forward to it. Thank you. And now here's Karuna Balasubramanian with a look back at the week's top stories.
The Bilovala Tamil family, whose deportation to Sri Lanka was halted, has been granted another reprieve after the federal court determined the family's case to stay in Australia should be determined by trial. The family's case rests on the 2-year-old daughter Tarunika's right to apply for a protection visa. She was born in Australia. The family is currently detained on Christmas Island and cannot be deported by the Australian government pending the trial's outcome. Protests have erupted in Egypt in a show of opposition against President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This comes after exiled businessman Muhammad Ali claimed that el-Sisi and his government have been squandering public funds on vanity projects despite the increase in poverty. While there has been no official statement from the Egyptian government, international advocacy groups Human Rights Watch has called on the Egyptian government to release the arrested protesters. They are also urging the United Nations to increase the pressure on Egypt to safeguard people's freedom of expression. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has met with US President Donald Trump on his official visit to Washington, D.C. During this meeting, President Trump announced sanctions on Iran after allegations of Tehran's involvement with the recent drone attack on Saudi oil facilities. Meanwhile, Mr. Morrison has announced Australia will not be drawn into a military conflict with Iran, following Trump's comments on a prospective military strike inclusive of nuclear weapons in Iran. The water crisis gripping New South Wales and Queensland is now at emergency levels, with country towns close to reaching day zero. Data shows that the first towns to lose water supply will be Dubbo, Cobar, Nangan and Narromine, and without significant rainfall, the Macquarie River is forecast to run dry by November. And Hong Kong is in its 4th month of protest with no end in sight as police fired tear gas in the clashes at Tuen Mun on Sunday. The Hong Kong government has issued a statement condemning the protesters' violent acts. While the Anti-Extradition Law Amendment Bill was withdrawn by the government, the protests continue amid fears the country's autonomy is slowly being eroded by the Chinese influence.
A vet is warning dog owners to look for toxic baits in their front and backyards after a couple of dogs were treated for poisoning. Meat filled with snail bait was scattered through a Carnegie family's front lawn, causing their dogs to become sick.
It's the lowest of acts. poisoning man's best friend. 2 dogs were brought into the East Bentley Vet Clinic feeling unwell.
They came in on a Sunday morning and we had a bit of a red herring to start with. They were having a whole lot of episodes of tremoring and virtually seizures in the morning.
At first, the owners, who didn't want to be identified, thought their dogs had accidentally eaten Play-Doh, but later found traces of snail bait in their front yard.
They were on their way out to the car and it just struck me, I thought of snail bait toxicity. There's a couple of toxins in snail baits that you buy from gardening nurseries. And so I went out and asked them and they said they'd had nothing like that in the house and had never bought it.
The owners say they're deeply troubled and upset that anyone would do such a thing to 2 treasured family members. They have been in contact with the police, who are now investigating.
Toxin, the snail bait that they found, was actually wrapped up in a little roll of meat and the centre was full of the snail poison, and it had been set as an actual bait as well as being sprinkled through the front yard.
Their dogs were lucky to get quick treatments, but vets are warning dog owners to stay vigilant.
Recommending just keep them on a lead and just keep them by your side and make sure that you've got a really close eye on them, because it happens so fast. It's really, really quickly. They can just walk straight past, pick up a bit of meat and keep walking.
Eleanor Freestrom, MOJO News.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has met with President Donald Trump in a week-long visit to the United States. It began with a grand welcoming, then a press conference in the Oval Office, which saw both leaders grilled on potential military conflict in Iran. And as the formalities wrapped up, a lavish state dinner at the White House.
Well, it's been a busy week for Prime Minister Scott Morrison, meeting President Donald Trump for the first time in his trip to the United States. The 2 leaders talked about things from a trip to Mars, virtual drive-through McDonald's, and tensions in Iran. Morrison said he made a point of commending the president on his natural instinct of restraint on the Iran matters, but assured that Australia will make its decisions in national interest. But the major talking point for this week was Prime Minister Morrison's decision not to attend the UN Climate Summit, with Foreign Minister Marise Payne stepping in as his replacement. President Donald Trump was also expected to knock back the summit, but decided to make a small appearance. Climate activist Greta Thunberg stunned the world with her speech at the summit, calling on a response from all world leaders.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Now, Prime Minister Morrison responded to Thunberg's speech. Here's what he had to say.
I'm committed to what I took to the Australian people, and that was 26% for 2030, and that's what we'll achieve. That's what I promised we'd do. That's what I told the Australian people.
And President Trump took to Twitter to say that Thunberg looked like a very happy girl and is looking forward to a bright and wonderful future. So nice to see. The Prime Minister is set to return to Australia at the end of the week. Chester.
The Senate has given the green light for a parliamentary inquiry into Australia's family court system, with One Nation leader Pauline Hanson selected as the co-chair. Gillian Area joins us now for more on this. Gillian, her appointment has been highly criticised.
Yes, it has, Chester. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's decision to put Senator Hanson as the co-chair of this inquiry has been criticised by Labor, the Greens and anti-domestic violence groups. Senator Hanson has long pushed for the inquiry, claiming that women are lying about domestic violence in court to gain the upper hand in custody battles. Anti-domestic violence campaigner Rosie Batty has condemned the government for announcing another inquiry when it has yet to respond to any of the 60 recommendations made by the Law Reform Commission earlier this year. The recommendations that were released in March are the latest in a string of reviews into the failings of the family court. Also making news in Canberra, welfare recipients continue to be targeted by the Coalition as it seeks to revive a bill to double the New Start waiting period from 13 weeks to 26 weeks for individuals with $18,000 or more in savings. Minister for Government Services Stuart Robert introduced the bill, saying it would increase self-reliance. But CEO of Australian Council of Social Service says the current New Start allowance of $40 a day leaves little capacity to meet emergency costs. She calls the bill a deeply flawed policy, stripping people of modest savings before they're eligible for social security benefits. The waiting period extension is expected to save the government $100 million over 4 years. Controversy over Gladys Liu's appointment into Parliament continues, after revelations she promised a reference that could be used in visa applications to foreign students who volunteered during her election campaign. The Liberal government holds a one-seat majority and has defended Ms. Liu, saying there is nothing to answer for. This has attracted praise from the Global Times, a Chinese media outlet considered to be reflective of the Chinese government. Both the Global Times and Liberal government accuse Labor of being racist for questioning the Hong Kong-born MP's links to the Chinese Communist Party and her allegiance to Australia. And in state politics, Premier Daniel Andrews is now the highest-paid politician, second only to the Prime Minister. The Premier will take home an extra $46,000 after an independent tribunal announced pay increases between 3% and 12% for Victorian politicians. This is the second pay rise in 3 months for Victorian MPs, who received an automatic increase of 3% in line with inflation back in July. This has angered police, paramedics and transport workers who've had their pay rise capped at 2% by the government after months of pay disputes. Back to you, Chester.
All right, Gillian, thank you. And now here's sport with Brittany Coles.
Thanks, Chester. Dramatic scenes took place at the MCG last weekend during the AFL preliminary finals. Richmond have booked their spot in the grand final, coming from behind to defeat Geelong Cats by 19 points. Tom Lynch was the hero of the match, booting 5 goals, and now the Tigers are chasing their second premiership in 3 seasons. Flag dreams came to a crushing end for Collingwood on Saturday night, now that GWS has qualified for its first AFL Grand Final with a heart-stopping 4-point win over Collingwood. The Giants out-pressured the Pies for much of the match. However, the Giants held on to win, and they will take on the hot favourites Richmond in this Saturday's final decider. The yellow and black victory has already begun. Richmond defeated Williamstown by 3 points in a classic VFL Grand Final at Acon Park on Sunday. Now the Tigers are on track to do the AFL-VFL Premiership double win. Richmond's Marline Pickett was voted best on ground, and now he is the favourite player to grab one of 2 spots that may be available for play for Richmond in Saturday's big game. Despite the disappointing end for the Pies in AFL, the Magpies VFLW team gave their fans reason to celebrate with a historic win on Sunday. Collingwood have won its first women's premiership in VFLW grand final triumph over the Western Bulldogs. The Pies pulled out a strong performance after struggling through the first 3 seasons and defeated the Western Bulldogs by 37 points. And moving to NRL now, Melbourne Storm dominated Parramatta Eels in a 32-0 win at Amy Park last Saturday night. Last year's grand finalists will meet again in an important match with the Sydney Roosters, hosting the Melbourne Storm at the SCG this coming Saturday in a blockbuster prelim final. Attending a live sporting match is sadly just a dream for women in Iran. FIFA has called on the Iranian government to allow women to stadiums to watch soccer. This comes after a devastating death of a female fan in September. Sahar Qadari, dubbed Blue Girl, set herself on fire to protest against her arrest for attending a soccer match. FIFA is expecting positive developments starting in the next Iran home match in October. And Aussie F1 ace Daniel Ricciardo has been disqualified from the Singapore GP qualifying for a technical infringement. The issue was referred to by the stewards for a FIA technical delegate who declared a breach had taken place regarding his car's 120 kilowatt limit. This is a major setback for Ricciardo, who now has to start from the back of the field in Sunday's race. We're only a few days out from Melbourne's biggest sporting event. I'm all aboard the Tigers train, Chester.
Yeah, go Tigers, Britt. Thank you. A Monash University engineering student is reaching for the stars to help save the planet. Shoaib Iqbal has built miniature imaging satellites that are launched into space to collect data to help us understand global warming.
Shoaib Iqbal has a unique approach to battling climate change, and it is out of this world.
We're building CubeSats. CubeSats are really small satellites which are usually 10 by 10 by 30 centimeters in size. So basically they're the size of a loaf of bread.
The engineering student, along with his startup business Saturn Space, is constructing a prototype satellite known as a CubeSat. They plan to launch it into space by 2021.
For someone who's interested in science and engineering, everyone wants to put something in orbit.
But Saturn Space has wider ambitions than just putting something into orbit. They want to save the planet.
It's a project where we're looking at environmental data. We're hoping to use information gathered from space to help fight climate change.
The satellites will monitor and analyze the Earth's natural resources from space and beam photographs back to Earth, allowing businesses to use this data to be more sustainable.
We want to be making a difference as soon as we can. And when it comes to space technology, the second space race is now.
Oil and gas companies often over-extract the Earth's resources, but data collected by the satellites can be used by these companies to pinpoint where the resources they need are. This allows them to get what they need without destroying ecosystems.
It's very much like a dream come true. Not only are we changing the world, but we're doing it from space, and we're doing it with technology that wasn't available in the very recent past.
While small in size, the CubeSats will be just as effective as a large satellite. And after around 6 months, they will fall back to Earth and burn up, leaving no waste behind.
Ambitiously, I intend to change the world from space.
Compared to other conventional satellites that can cost up to millions of dollars, this one will only cost $10,000, which will hopefully make it easier to make a change. Andrew T. Sevenson, MOJO News.
And that is MOJO News for now. You can stay up to date on our website, mojonews.com.au. I'm Chester Nunn. I hope you enjoy your week. From the team, bye for now.